The Richard Lewis Esports Podcast. Taking you behind the scenes of the esports industry.
Hello and welcome to the Richard Lewis Esports Podcast that, as the lovely jingle at the start tells you, aims to take you behind the scenes of the esports industry. And this week we've got a guest that's going to do exactly that, do some real Wizard of Oz shit and lift the veil. It's a chap that you probably don't know the name of. He's called Rory Dickenson. And the reason why we're talking to him is that he was one of the people who were unfortunate enough to be working at ESGN. If you're listening to the podcast and you don't know who ESGN are, this show will still be entertaining for you, I guarantee it, but Google them. They were part of the Sapinda-funded operations within esports. Basically, they aimed to be a broadcasting company that sort of did tournaments and events and put them out through VODs and streams. And they burned through a fuck ton of money, quite an epic amount. But their decline is well documented. I urge you to go and read about it if you haven't already. There's a very good article on Gamers by a chap called Joe Interzone Edwards that I certainly recommend that you read to get fully appraised of the situation. And indeed, Rod Slasher Breslau did some good work as well. So we're going to throw over to Rory. Rory, it's great to have you on. I'm super glad that you're able to come on the show. And I also want to say as well, if anyone that thinks this is cynical or exploitative, you are indeed going to get the proceeds from this show. Yeah, we're going to give you the money to go towards all the kind of expenses you've accrued while trying to deal with the fallout from ESGN. So welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, Richard. Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's nice to be here. I'm honoured.
Oh, well, it's great to have you on. I'm sure you're going to have some amazing stories. So let's start at the beginning. I mean, tell us about yourself, what it is you do, and how you ended up at ESGN.
Well, I'm a filmmaker, and I work in quite a few different disciplines. Film's not the only area. And sort of towards the end of last year, around October time, I heard about this company that were looking for some people to become involved in some commercial shoots, and then with an eye to developing this new company around esports, which of course now became ESGN. And at the time, my knowledge of esports was basically limited to me playing Street Fighter on the SNES when I was about 13, so not exactly a high level overview. But obviously, we were pretty amazed by the kind of scope of what's going on out there. So I came at it from a fairly circuitous kind of route where I wasn't particularly knowledgeable about esports at all. But what I, and hopefully what a lot of people did know about, was potentially how to actually make this thing work in a very short amount of time. You know, we're talking about turning up and making a studio and actually developing a product and developing an entire show and an entire series with very, very little time. So yeah, that's kind of how I first started out with it, which was basically building it up from nothing.
So let's talk about how they kind of hooked you. I'm interested in this. I mean, did they come and approach you directly because they'd seen your work? Did you approach them initially? How did they sell what they were going to do to you? Because, as you say, as someone who didn't have a huge esports background, I imagine it must have been quite a hard sell that they put on you. They must have made it sound amazing.
Yeah, they did. They basically, what they were talking about doing, which interested me, was this kind of grand unification of esports, which now I realise is the kind of thing that everyone in esports is absolutely sick of hearing, because it seems like every month or so there's some new flash kid turning up going, "Hey guys, have you ever thought about, like, you know, unifying everything?" It's like, yeah, thanks, mate. But yeah, so they sold it to me on the basis of taking something a little bit similar to, let's say, the ESPN Fight Night model, bit of razzmatazz, very tongue-in-cheek. Don't forget, was the original kind of brief, the original style of what we were trying to do, which obviously, well, perhaps wasn't that well received on the internet at first in the early days, like, are the notorious ring girls and all of this kind of stuff. I thought it was just a really interesting chance to basically work with some very, very good people, because the people that were working in post-production and in studio, and indeed the senior producers, were some very, very interesting, very talented people. And for me, that was really the main opportunity, and that's the reason why I decided to sort of take the plunge and go with this crazy new company.
So my understanding is that when you were working there, you were working below Morgan Stone, who was the main kind of producer. He was the guy that everyone harped on about when it first launched, because he did that TV show for Tony Hawk's and had directed some Snoop Dogg music videos, and was considered to be, quite a high roller by esports standards. So what was your day to day? I mean, what were your duties?
Well, I guess it was split into two, really. So when it was a sort of standard week, Monday to Thursday, let's say, I'd be basically working as a producer. So lining up the next show, making sure that we had all the right talent in for whichever game it happened to be. But then also, of course, going through the massive amounts of rushes and bin stuff with the post-production department to actually assemble some kind of narrative out of all of this colossal amount of footage that we produced, and it really was huge amounts. Then when the weekend came around, we would have a media day for all the players, and they'd all be arriving from all around the world. We'd get them in, try and get them sort of relaxed and accustomed to the environment. And that was very, very important to us. We really, really wanted to make sure that the players were being not just well treated, but that they were having a really, really positive experience in every way. So we had some very good people working in that department. And then, of course, we would shoot over the weekend. And I guess for quite a few of the shoots, I was like a sort of first AD. So for non-TV or film people, that means it's like the person that is out there on the floor going, you stand over there, we need this here, that there, this here. It's a lot of talking, and you are basically the complete gobshite on set. Like, you have to tell people to shut up. You have to say, right, let's go, we're rolling. But you also have to try not to translate any pressure onto the players, the casters. It's a real juggling act between keeping the people happy that are your talent, and then making sure that everything else just works. So yeah, that's kind of what I did.
You also, we talked about this prior to recording, but you also were kind of one of the guys that were, like all production teams, I mean, you've got to bring in as good a product as you can for almost as little money as you can. The idea is to not cut corners, but to be frugal, to make sure that the expenditure makes sense. Now, I think most people will find that was part of your day-to-day. Quite surprising, given that ESGN burned through these exorbitant amounts of money, which we're going to get to. But can you just confirm that actually you were one of the guys who were there who were saying, well, actually, maybe we don't need to spend this sort of money on this particular product?
Look, from our point of view, I have absolutely no doubt that we delivered a very well and very stringently produced show. And there was absolutely no playing around with money. Believe me, we ran this with a very professional, very experienced team of producers who know exactly how the world works. Just because there's money available doesn't mean obviously we're going to, oh yeah, let's order another crate of Cristal and a box of plants and just like set fire to that bunch of money in the corner. It wasn't like that at all. The difference is that is what you could consider to be like a micro cost. But if you look at the macro, if you look at the sort of broader structure of the way that ESGN was set up, that's where the problem lies. If you hire a very prestigious big studio space in Studio Babelsberg, which is the oldest film studio in the world, which is a place where Tarantino has shot, where Wes Anderson has shot, going back to where Metropolis was made, it's a really, really, it's sort of like the European equivalent of Hollywood, basically.
Yeah.
So if you set up and you get this lavish studio, then that's obviously a absolutely gigantic cost. If you then fill it with hopefully very talented staff members, that's another big cost. ESGN burning through money was, in my opinion, because there was a complete lack of forward planning in terms of how the output, the product, would then actually make money for them coming back, which seems extraordinarily short-sighted. And I'm afraid I think it's as simple as that. It just was.
So I got to ask, I mean, again, you've been around the block, you know these things, maybe not about esports, but certainly about making films. The idea of an esports company hiring, shooting space at Studio Babelsberg is just hilarious to me. I mean, it was one of the things that immediately stood out as being ridiculous, like literally ridiculous. It made no sense whatsoever, but especially when you saw the finished product, which, no disrespect to your work, I don't think it really required that kind of studio to produce. Indeed, I think it could have been done in any equivalent studio, like further down the chain, if you like any normal studio that we would use in an esports production thing, like what ESL has or DreamHack. I think, to have it at Babelsberg was madness. Did you have any kind of reservations? Like, holy shit, why are we here?
Every single day when I woke up, went into work. Yeah, absolutely. There's a few points that I guess are around this. I mean, one, the thing that you say in itself, that you took notice that it was ridiculous that they had space. Well, certain marketing people would go, yeah, but you did take notice though, didn't you? And that, I think, was sort of part of the philosophy of what they were trying to do, which was to present it in this completely different, ludicrously over the top style, which, if anything, is at the very least attention grabbing. And of course, it's going to be hugely divisive in the beginning. We expect that, we want to see the trolls coming out on the threads saying this, that, and the other about it, because it gets people talking. I totally agree with you that it could have been done on a completely different scale, and it could have been done for a lot less money. But it just seems like this was what they wanted to do. They thought that, by definition, making it into a Hollywood-style production would bring Hollywood-style attention to it. But of course, we all know it's not quite as simple as that.
No. I mean, there was some fundamental flaws in the business model as well. A lot of commentators pointed out that it almost seemed that ESGN didn't understand that they weren't going to make money through advertising VOD replays. And when I failed to see what other plan they had for making money other than maybe sponsorships or, advertisement, product placement, that kind of thing. I don't really see where the money was going to get made. Did they ever talk to you about that, about what their plans were, about how they were going to make profit from this?
Well, I wish they had done in the early days, because aside being involved in filmmaking, I've also worked in different areas, in different management roles, in completely different worlds. And I would be absolutely fascinated to see what their 1 year plan, their 3 year plan, and their 5 year plans were for all of this, because I don't know if it even existed. One thing that you have to sort of understand, for anyone listening to try and understand, that is important to the structure, is to say that there was Studio Babelsberg, where we were, the production team, where the show actually got made. But then there was also a second main office, which was in Mitte in Berlin, the middle of Berlin. This is the poshest, smartest area of town. And it is where the executives had their glass, ivory, gold, and human bone tower, where they occasionally threw piles of banknotes off the top of. And they obviously were very disconnected from what was actually happening at Babelsberg. And of course, we, by association, were therefore completely disconnected with what their strategy, if any, was. And it's debatable, really, what the hell they were trying to achieve, whether they just thought, okay, well, here's some money, we'll just start it and see. But that seems to me incredibly irresponsible, particularly given the situation that we now find ourselves in, where we have people that have relocated from other countries. We have people that can't pay their rent. We have like really, really difficult situations for people who have suddenly lost their jobs because of this absolutely gross mismanagement.
So when did you, well, actually, no, before we move on to that, let's talk about some numbers, because, I mean, again, with your industry experience, for the kind of show that was being produced, could you give us some kind of insight into how much you would expect to spend and how much was being spent behind the scenes? You know, kind of give us some idea about some of the numbers that were being thrown around and what you would expect to be normal.
In terms of the actual production of, let's say, one season of Fight Night, we would shoot one season over the course of 2 days. Sometimes that became 2 seasons even. So let's take Hearthstone as an example. You would get the 2 teams playing all across Saturday and all across Sunday, and that would be 2 seasons. Now, to produce one of those episodes would cost us, from just our production costs, would be about 30,000 euros. Now, that is actually extremely reasonable to produce 2 seasons worth of content, particularly when you're talking about, we were very lucky to work with people of the caliber of Trump and Crip and Artosis, and, you know, the list goes on. Those guys are really, really well respected guys in that community. So, you know, you've got kind of a banker there, and to be able to bring all of those guys in for under 30 grand, we're talking about flying people first class from all around the world. That's a very, very big expense. I think that the financial management from our side of things was actually pretty reasonable. What I can't tell you, because I don't know the figures, is what the cost is for the staff role, what the cost is for the studio hire. Those 2 expenses are going to be many, many, many times over what we were actually spending on the production side of things. So I don't know. That's the best I can give you. But I honestly don't think that we spent excessively or unwisely in any area. Of course, sometimes mistakes happen. That always happens, and that's why you have contingency planning in any production budget. But yeah, I don't really feel it was the case of us sort of being ludicrously over the top in any particular area.
Well, there was lots of other examples of overspend. I mean, that all sort of came tumbling out of the closet when it was apparent ESGN was going to go under. We saw, I mean, not least of all, the amount that they spent on announcing themselves to the world, which, I mean, that particular press junket was ridiculous.
Well, they blew an absolutely huge amount of money. Were you there, Richard?
Funnily enough, I got invited several times, and you know, I knew that it was going to be. But well, look, regardless of the long-term success of the project, obviously I've been around for a long time. I've seen all the here today, gone tomorrow bullshit. But I just hate the idea of getting everyone in esports in a room, ply them with free drinks, and then say, look how amazing we are. Because if you buy everyone a free lunch and get everyone pissed, everyone will think you're amazing. I mean, you know, obviously that's one of the cheapest sales techniques out there. You know, get people drunk, you know, show them you've got money to burn. Everyone thinks, oh, well, you know, you must have money to burn. It must be never ending because look at how they're spending it. And everyone buys into it. I think it's a really cynical way to kind of, you know, announce your intentions. So I told them flat out, I'm not going to go. I don't do circle jerks. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'll be the guy who's reserving judgment. And when it all goes to shit, I'll be the guy writing about you. I don't want to compromise being able to do that by coming along and having a nice big suckle on the champagne, you know, teat with everybody else. So I didn't go. But, I mean, I had lots of friends and colleagues who did. And they all told me that it was, again, just absolutely ridiculously over the top. I mean, there was chartered flights, I think, put on for some people from Korea. I mean, you know, if you can, again, imagine the costs involved in that. And that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, so were you present at that?
No, I didn't go.
So what were your reasons for not going?
I just didn't. I have literally zero interest in anything to do with the marketing side, other than from a business angle. I'm interested to know how good it is. I will judge it because that has an impact on my job. But I have absolutely, I can't imagine anything worse than going to one of these rooms and drinking a glass of champagne and watching a bunch of people act like complete idiots. It's really not my, I wasn't particularly up for it, but not in any high-minded way. It's just not how I like to spend my time. But it is very interesting when you put into the context that I just told you that a series costs 30 grand for us to make 30,000. The cost of that press launch alone was many, many hundreds of thousands, possibly into the millions. So what I do want to say is that the people that were working directly on actually producing this stuff, I know that there's a lot of people out there on Reddit and on the Twitter chats and stuff that probably think like, wow, those guys just didn't know how to spend their money. I mean, it's up to them to make their own minds up. But really, I think that the financial handling was wrong, not in the production side of things, but in other areas.
Well, yeah, they spent, put it this way, I called up the Waldorf Astoria, asked how much it would cost to hire a function room for 200 people and provide a free bar and food for them, as well as overnight travel. And, 50,000 euros is conservative for that. In fact, it was probably closer to 80. And that's before you get into the madness of chartered flights and everything else. And as you say, if you think about how much a series had cost, for it to only get to the stage 5 months later, maybe less, where they can't pay the talent, they can't pay the crew, it seems to be quite an oversight to be able, to spend that money at the outset, thinking, well, we're not going to need this further down the line. And the money that was owed to some of the players wasn't even a great amount of money. We were talking, the €1,000 appearance fees that they were getting, which...
Yeah, but it's the principle, isn't it?
Oh, of course, yeah.
You don't want to be another one of these dickhead organisations that turns up and promises the world, and then obviously can't follow it up. And that, of course, is exactly what happened. And it's particularly embarrassing for people like me who have to work with the people that actually have to work directly with these guys, And so I've spent a lot of time and energy trying to build up good relationships with these guys, only for that to be completely pulled out from under my feet by the complete ineptitude of other people and the lack of foresight and planning. So yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, really.
Yeah. So let's get back to sort of this, the collapse, the overspend, the nightmare that went on to unfold. Now, when did you first start realizing that something was very wrong, and what were the telltale signs?
Well, in the very beginning, I'd heard that there was perhaps a slightly dubious past of some of the investors. And before I accepted the job, I actually did quite a bit of research off my own back, because for me, as I'm sure it would be for many people, you want to know, well, dubious in what way? Do these guys have human rights convictions or something? So obviously I started doing some digging into the two main guys who make up the Sapinda investment group. One of them, you're going to help me out here, Lars, what's his surname? Lars
Windhorst, I think. Yeah.
Windhorst. Prosecuted for tax evasion, or not prosecuted, but he sort of settled out of court, but basically implied quite a lot of guilt in that, allegedly. And the other guy, Dr. Kim, I don't know what he's a doctor of, but he's being prosecuted in Korea. I believe he can't actually return to Korea because he's got so many pending convictions waiting for him there. So obviously that raised some serious alarm bells right in the beginning. Okay, we've got two guys with an investment group, both of whom have tax problems going on behind the scenes. So that was an early indicator that, okay, we need to be very careful here. But then the flip side of that is, well, a lot of business people, we're talking about billionaire business people, a lot of them transgress, unfortunately, a lot of international laws. Look at companies like Amazon even not paying their taxes, and lots of loopholes that get exercised. So I suppose I sort of told myself, like, okay, well, let's hope they've got good intentions. There's a very talented crew here. Let's work with them and let's put 120% into actually making it all work.
I mean, it's quite interesting, actually, because, I mean, the Sapinda guys, they have said privately, so my sources inform me, that they are getting sick and tired, if you like, of putting up all of this money, vast amounts of money, millions and millions. I mean, $34.5 million is what ESGN has burned through, I believe. I mean, might have been something close to that. I think it was. I can't remember what the total investment for it was.
Obviously, my 30 million salary did take.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, you are worth quite a bit of that, no doubt. But no, I mean, actually, sorry, I tell a lie. I think the 34.5 million was for a Zubu, right? I think their other thing. So maybe I don't know how much they put into ESGN. I don't think that's ever been made public. I know they ran at a 1.5 million euro loss in their first year. But anyway, they've said that they're sick of investing all this money and basically giving it to people who then burn through it. And they're aghast, because they're venture capitalists. They want to see a return. They don't mind losing the money. They see it like gambling in a way. They put the money down, they give it to the people to spend, and if they get lucky, in inverted commas, if they're competent, right, then they get the return.
Well, look, but Sapinda, if you're listening to this right now, give me that fucking money, because I will spend it a lot better and I'll manage it a lot better. And I'll give you a proper strategy that works over a number of years, and not after a few months go, oh, wait a minute, guys, how are we actually going to, make some money? I mean, it's ridiculous. If that's how Sapinda feel, then either they got very unlucky in this particular instance, or they have enough money that they can actually just afford to take a certain number of hits on these things. Well, sure, I bet they're fed up. But I tell you what, we were pretty fed up when Sapinda decided to not give us any money to pay the staff. That's I have limited sympathy with a bunch of billionaire oligarchs going, oh, we're a bit fed up that some people have wasted some money. Yeah, well, there's people that are fed up, 40 staff members that haven't been paid for many months. So, yeah.
I mean, I think everyone says the same thing as well. Like, oh, why didn't they give that money to me? Like, I can't conceive of how you could mess it up so bad. And I think that's a recurring cry throughout esports. People said it when CGS burned through $60 million of Fox and Murdoch money, in 2006, 2007.
Although, to be fair, it is always quite funny to watch Rupert Murdoch lose money.
Yes, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to lose any sleep over that. Although, as you say, maybe the people who had their livelihoods kind of cruelly snatched away from them, maybe they did lose some sleep at the time.
Yeah.
I remember it being pretty stressful.
Why is it, Richard, then, why are people being continually employed by venture capitalist groups that are incapable of actually running this stuff properly? Because you are someone that knows about the esports scene. Why is there always being this constant oversight when it comes to the management and the executive planning in these areas?
To be honest, I've got no idea. I mean, all I can say is from my experience that the people that have the better packaging, that look like the best option, they're the guys that don't really have the esports knowledge, the industry knowledge. And the people that have been entrenched in esports for years and years and years and have the knowledge, they're generally, blunt, miserable, because they've been in the trenches. They've seen it all. So, like, if I was to go into a room and pitch for some money, someone to give me 34.5 million or whatever, and I was to make that proposal, it'd be like, we need to do this and we need to do that, and you'd be wasting your money if we got then that guy's shit and don't use him, and no. And I think it would be very, an honest appraisal. There'd be no razzle dazzle, but these people, so I heard at the time when the whole ESGN thing was being laid out, somebody sat in a room and was projecting that they would be, in their second full year, they would be making a profit, and that profit would be potentially running into millions of euros. I don't know how they could have said that with a straight face, because there's no businesses in esports that do that. It's just an absurd number. But when you're a venture capitalist, they're the kind of numbers that you want to hear. And if you're hearing it from a guy who's in a sharp suit and supposedly on his CV has the credentials, I think you're inclined to go, you know what, this guy understands business, he looks well turned out, he's the guy we're going to give the money to. And it's just a classic style over substance problem that I think we've got in esports. That's always been my take on it. Plus, as well, a lot of the people, how these businesses get the hookup and how they introduce each other, it's ridiculous. So it'll be like, I don't know, there'll be a guy who knows a guy who has a cousin who plays a computer game and he's into esports, and he mentions it at a family dinner. And this guy with money to burn says, well, maybe we can do something in that. What's an amount that's appropriate? What, 60 million? Yeah, that's nothing. That's no problem. I'll sign a check for that. And we'll make my cousin the guy that we go to for all the advice. And he says that these guys are okay, so we'll hire them. And it's just classic nepotism. And unfortunately, when you have nepotism and cronyism, it's a backdoor to incompetence a lot of the time.
So what you're basically saying is that we need to rebrand the guys that actually have the knowledge, the foot soldiers that know about esports. We need to get them a bunch of nice suits, get them a proper haircut and a nice meal and a good night's sleep, and then get them in front of the Sapinders of this world. And then together, Richard, you and I, plus some sharp-suited nerds, will take over the world.
That would be great in theory, but and honestly, perhaps it's not the craziest thing that's ever been said, but I don't know what it is, man. I honestly think there's just something about certain people. It definitely helps if you've got a qualification or have worked in an industry outside of esports that's well respected. Maybe you've got a business degree or a law degree, or you've worked for a law firm. Or you're a GP. There's people who've turned their back on a medical profession to work in esports. But unfortunately, these people don't really seem to look at it beyond a profit-making venture. And I hear that a lot from these people. It's like, oh, well, if I wanted to, I could just go back and be a lawyer. Well, there's obviously a reason why you don't do that. I don't believe you're being so altruistic here that you're rejecting a law career and making less money in esports. Obviously, people operate, on a principle of self-interest. So it's a very strange industry. I've always said that the people who seem the most impressive are actually, when it comes to delivering the products, they have the worst track records. And that just seems, and yet their mistakes, because no one reports on them, because esports journalists are kind of controlled by the people with the money as well. We all get told if you write about X, Y, and Z, you get blacklisted, you never go to another event. Oh, this sponsor has a big ad campaign on your website, so you can't write about this guy because he works for them. And, so they get a free pass. Their incompetence is mostly lost in the ether because no one ever goes on the record and talks about it, and no journalist ever sort of champions the cause, which is why things like this conversation being recorded for posterity are quite important, I think, for the industry.
Well, if there's any one thing that I could possibly hope would be good coming out of this situation of ESGN, it's that it might potentially help to somehow get the wheels of change in motion. The fact that you're talking about it being such an incredibly closed shop, such a overpoweringly controlling community, that is not good for any community. It doesn't matter what it is, whether we're talking about political or economic or whatever. If you have this kind of closed mentality, you're only going to hinder your own cause. and esports will continue to not fulfill its very, very massive potential as long as there are people that are sort of suppressing these stories and also just basically running amok with esports as if it's like a business plaything. And I hope that the next ESGN manages to actually really deliver something, and I think it's very possible.
So getting back and reeling in from our tangent about how we're going to save the world, the esports world, that is, we were talking about when you first started to notice the cracks appearing. And I'm sure you've got one or two sort of amusing stories around that, because I mean, everyone I was talking to at the time, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing.
I suppose one that does spring to mind that actually directly kind of involved me, although hopefully not my fault. It was DreamHack, and obviously it's in the middle of Sweden, and ESGN wanted their presence there. So they flew over a bunch of producers and Frodan, and the idea was to, get the face out there and do a bunch of filming. What they forgot to do was take their really, really important prop, which was one of the one of those like papier-mâché modules that they'd made from StarCraft for Dan to wear. But it was okay, no problem. They called me and said, hi, what are you doing? It's like, well, it's Friday evening. I'm just, I'm about to enjoy my evening, right? They're like, yeah, we need you to drive to Sweden now. It's like, what? Yeah, drive to Sweden. We'll give you a big envelope of money. Just do it. You need to take this prop. So basically, they hired an incredibly expensive Mercedes for me. They gave me a big envelope.
A Mercedes?
Oh, yeah. It was a really lovely car. They told me to get to the office immediately. So I got to the office, picked up the keys to this car, picked up this prop, and then they said, drive. And I had to be there by midday the next day. So I drove from Berlin to the middle of Sweden in one crazed burst. Luckily, they'd given me so much money in an envelope that I could, by the time I got there, I booked into a wonderful hotel, sat by a lake, and had an extremely expensive dinner, which I then, of course, charged back to the company. But I guess the point is that the general levels of oversight were so insane. But the way to remedy it was, don't worry, we'll just throw some money at it. Someone's fucked up. Oh, well, let's just send Rory in a big car to Sweden. It's not really a good system, I suppose.
Are there any other examples of gross incompetence to that level? Because I love hearing these kind of stories. These are the stories that define esports for me. Everyone's got a ridiculous story where it's like, it just makes no sense what's happened. It is just insanity under a microscope. So
well, the absolute clusterfuck that was League of Legends springs to mind.
Right, yeah.
So this was at a stage now where none of the staff have been paid for quite some time, but we're still there working, turning up, because we still sort of want to make something of it. We don't want to throw everything away. And so head office say, right, League of Legends, we want League. We were like sort of slightly rolling our eyes because we didn't want to do League. No offense to it, but we just didn't feel that at that time that we could really represent it particularly well, and we didn't think that it really fit in with Fight Night. So anyway, we were like, yeah, all right, fine, get League. So we will go away and book a load of really big names, like Phantom Lord, etc. And we book their first class international flights and stuff and everything. We get everything set up. We get all their hotels set up. Then 2 days later, we get a phone call going, yeah, we don't want to do it now. Forget League. So can you just not do that now, please? We were like, right. Okay, then. So we then tried to cancel a lot of flights, but we couldn't cancel all of them because of various contracts that we have with various airlines. And we then tried to cancel everything else. We lost a lot of money there, but hey-ho, it's their decision. Mm-hmm. But then 2 days later, the phone rings and they go, yeah, so League of Legends. So yeah, pretty excited that that's going to be happening. We were like, you've got to be fucking kidding. Is this some kind of joke? Because don't forget, in the meantime, we're also having to tell the players, oh yeah, hi Phantom Lord. Yes, sorry mate, we've had to cancel that thing. He's like, all right then, well that's a shame, never mind. 2 days later, hey, Phantom Lord, how's it going? Do you fancy coming out to Berlin? Or, all right, yeah, no, we'll go fuck ourselves. Yep, sure. Okay, bye. It's incredibly embarrassing and it's just ridiculous. And the way that these decisions were being made, I don't know what they were doing, whether they were just getting drunk and then throwing darts at a board and then that would be their strategy or what. But it was just insane. So it was on and then it was off and then it was back on again. And then we had to actually change the date again because they weren't happy with the date of filming. We messed those League of Legends kids around so much, and I feel bad, really, that, I mean, they were still incredibly tolerant and very, very nice. I would have, upon hearing my name and meeting me, probably punched me in the face if I was one of them. But they were extremely nice. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the League of Legends thing was kind of ridiculous because, I mean, one of my sources, when I was doing the reporting on this, showed me some of the emails and whatnot that was, occurring at the time. And they were consciously taking the decision to do the League of Legends event, even though they were already at a stage where they had no money.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't know, like, at what point do you think maybe we should try to bail some of this water out of the sinking ship rather than, puncturing more holes in it?
Yeah, because don't forget, once you finish filming, that is only the small part of the job. We then had to give hours and hours of footage to our heroic post-production team, who are absolutely brilliant. And that is many, many, many hours of very, very hard work to actually assemble the whole damn thing. So it's not just like, a weekend's worth of shooting. It's weeks worth of work afterwards to turn it into a finished article. And you're right. It was at that point, that was the last straw for me. I did the League of Legends shoot, and then I told myself, right, at this point, I'm now going on strike. I'm going on gardening leave, which was an option that we were given. We were told, like, look, you don't have to come in. We haven't paid you. So I said, all right, I'm going to exercise that. I'm going to take a bit of holiday, which you owe me already, and I'm going to have some time off until you can sort your shit out. And then a few days later, I get an email saying that I was fired.
Yeah, I was going to say, when they presented this offer of gardening leave, it seems that almost anyone who accepted the offer got fired.
Yeah, it was one of those great situations. Yeah, I mean,
well, it's like, I mean, how more loaded can you get? I mean, I'm no employment law expert, although I used to be a representative for a trade union. But I'm pretty sure you can't do that. I don't think you can present the offer of gardening leave to someone and then just fire them if they take it. I'm pretty sure that's kind of a no-no, I think.
It's sort of not really the point of gardening leave, is it? It's like literally you go to your nice garden, but then ESGN pop up and douse it in petrol and set fire to it and then shoot you in the back of the head at the same time. It's not really a very nice way to do business, is it? No. At this point, though, I was so exhausted and basically angry at the management of the whole thing that I just couldn't be bothered to actually turn it into a lawsuit. But I do know that at least one other person did actually actively sue ESGN for this kind of behaviour, this flouting of basic contract law. So they were definitely in the wrong. But it's very hard to, if you're a foreigner living in Berlin, trying to conceive of that paperwork is just a nightmare. Even trying to get the money that they just owe us, that they've owed us for months, lots of money. I'm literally sitting here talking to you, and next to me I'm looking at Bundesagente für Arbeit forms, which means just a horrific world of German paperwork like you would not believe. So, yeah.
Well, I'm also led to believe, and you'll be able to verify this, that, I mean, a lot of the staff, they were asking for contracts. They wanted to sign contracts. They were told contracts were being drawn up for them to sign, and that under German employment law, they didn't need to worry because if you had received 1 month's payment for a job, it was kind of like a tacit agreement, that you were employed by them, and the paperwork was almost like a secondary concern. But a lot of the staff I spoke to didn't even have contracts. They've got no way of sort of proving any of the terms.
believe it or not, despite working for them since November, I never had a signed contract. And in the position that I'm in now, that is an absolute headache because I'm supposed to be able to present this stuff in court and say, look, here's my contract. But they were so incredibly slow and lackadaisical about ever sorting it out that for me, it never happened. And for some other people as well. I mean, it's just incredible.
A lot of people, one of the criticisms I think that were leveled at the staff, which is, don't get me wrong, it's very unique to esports where we have this blame the victim kind of culture. I think, I guess at worst you can accuse some of the guys of being naive. But what would you say to people that are like, well, it's your fault you didn't sign a contract?
Well, I mean, for a start, what you observed is actually completely correct. Under German law, if you receive 1 month's pay, you are then effectively contracted. So we do have a contract. It's just not having the physical piece of paper, which can be difficult. So that's one point. Another thing to say is it is very, very hard to get an entire TV studio entirely built, everything. We're talking about just an empty warehouse space before. It's very hard to take that from nothing into something in a very short amount of time. I personally and many other people worked hundreds of hours of overtime just in the months leading up to the launch because the executives had moved the goalposts much earlier about when we were to start broadcasting, and we had a huge amount of pressure and people really worked. We pulled all-nighters. We did a huge amount. Now, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that to the people who say, well, you are idiots for not having contracts. Well, I sort of believe that actually sometimes you just have to work really, really hard to get something together, and then the product will come back to you, that something good will come back to you. Now, that might sound incredibly 60s and hippie-ish and incredibly naive, but I really felt like, okay, well, Studio Babelsberg, massive team of very talented people, this is going to work if we put the hours in. And that is what everyone felt. We were a really, really strong team. And so you can't always expect for every piece of paperwork to be there in place right from the word go. So, yeah, maybe we were optimistic. We were so young, Richard, back then. Now, the horror.
Yeah, the horror of being grown up and facing it.
Yeah.
So look, before we get into the horror, and I definitely want to talk about it because, for all the amusing stories and the ridiculous hijinks, there's a very serious kind of aftermath. But let's defer talking about that for a moment. You were in the production team, and I've just got to ask, there were some videos that I think would be best described as cringeworthy. I remember one in particular which had some League of Legends people dancing.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's making me feel quite ill just thinking about it. Yeah. Go on.
So my question is, as a serious filmmaker, how the fuck did you let that slip through?
It wasn't my watch, Richard.
Well, I got to ask, dude. Come on.
When this stuff gets shot is during the media day, and I mean, stylistically, I hated the content of everything that we did. I honestly, I thought it was awful and was mostly embarrassed by it. But the decision for the tone doesn't come from us.
Yeah.
We're the people that make the thing. We're not the people that go, it has to be like this. That's the chief execs. Unfortunately, they're not the creative people. They're not the people that have an education and a background in filmmaking or TV or production or anything like that. They don't know anything of that. They just sit there and they think, yeah, we think we'd like it to be like this. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that win through. So if they say we want the League of Legends kids dancing, then that is unfortunately what we have to give them. Now that coupled with Morgan Stone's kind of style of like this as you pointed out back at the beginning, this kind of X Games, Tony Hawk, Snoop Dogg type of approach. I guess that was the theory, but I guess that a lot of that was sort of lost in translation, and what you end up with is something that just looks appalling and that I would never in a million years put on my showreel.
Yeah, I got to say, it's a bit different, I think, getting Snoop Dogg to kind of send himself up, or Tony Hawk. You know, these guys are inherently cool in one way or another. They've got that sort of X factor.
Well, Richard, are you about to say that League of Legends players are not inherently cool?
I have probably committed career suicide by intimating it, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes. What was it like? I mean, so were you there working when that was happening? Were you like telling people, can you dance a bit better? Chaos, can you bust out the Running Man? Yeah, that's great. Like, were you giving these people directions?
No, that wasn't my shoot, and of course you would expect me to say that, but it genuinely was not my shoot. So on the media day, what's happening is a bunch of different stuff in different locations at different times. So at that point, suddenly we have, rather than just me or Morgan directing, you've got a lot of different people doing different things, basically. So that happened, and the difficulty is, of course, is that you don't necessarily know. You're trusting that someone's going to produce good quality material, but you don't know until you sit down on Monday morning after all the players have gone back home and you start to go through the rushes, and then you have that sinking feeling. And the post-production kids, they're pretty cool. They're pretty sarcastic. They would just, you bring this footage in, and Monday, I would be getting it in the neck from these people. They're like, what the hell is this utter bullshit? I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know. It wasn't mine, all right?
What cinematic atrocities did you commit? What were you responsible for?
What was I responsible for?
I mean, come on, if the whole ESGN thing's going to get a bit Nuremberg, then you must have committed a war crime yourself at some point.
Oh, Jesus, many. Where to start? I feel like lying down on the couch for this one. Well, I suppose, what were the worst things? Oh, yeah, when Blizzard told us to make the studio look a bit more like a tavern, a medieval tavern, right, which they did with about 2 days' notice before the shoot. Now, obviously, the style of the set was to be very sort of clean, hypermodern, a bit neon, a bit reflective. Suddenly, we're being asked to turn that into a medieval tavern. It's a massive set. We've got very little money to play with. So, yeah, I was sort of responsible for the really weird selection of barrels, books, swords and stuff that we ended up having on set as props during that Hearthstone shoot. And when I look at it now, weirdly, we hung all these red banners and all these white banners up. And I don't know, I should have thought, but red and white banners hanging up in Berlin building.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, it was that horrible moment when we stepped back and looked at it and thought, right.
Oh, Jesus. And I was thinking, when I watched it at home, I was thinking it reminded me of the Crystal Maze, the medieval zone in the Crystal Maze with Richard O'Brien.
Are you going to have to explain to some of your listeners?
I can. I'll just put some sort of a link, I think, on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's for the best. And then when people see that, they're going to realise the very high standards that we were achieving.
Oh, yes, very much so. But
thank you for that, Richard. I'm going to put that on my CV.
Yeah, well, look,
I've been told that my work is reminiscent of classic Crystal Maze.
Hey, when I was part of the CGS, the production team that made that for the UK, they were the guys who did Robot Wars.
Right.
So, I mean,
a common theme here, isn't it?
Yeah, I think me and you have pretty much we've achieved kind of working along to a same level as some of the cornerstones of trash TV in the UK. So, I mean, that is something to be proud of. I'm happy about it.
When I was a kid, that was all I ever wanted. So, yeah, look at me now, pal.
Yeah, you've done it. So here's the thing. The Hearthstone community, they were probably one of the few that really lamented the death of ESGN. I think League of Legends was like, give a fuck. We've we've got LCS. Like, I mean, anything else is a sideshow to that.
Yeah.
You know, StarCraft are like, hey, whatever, man. You know, like we just whatever. It's cool. We're happy with where we are as a game, as an esports title. But Hearthstone, it was kind of like the first real big thing they had. And they all said this. They all said the same thing. It was almost unilateral on the subreddit that ESGN made great content. It's just it's such a shame that it didn't work out the way it was. So I mean, I know. Were you guys conscious of how important you were to the Hearthstone community? Were they like a community you guys had more focus on when you were like creating content?
Well, it's a difficult question, that. The Hearthstone community were fantastic, basically, and they were, not only were the players absolutely great to work with, which, I'm sorry if this sounds bad, but I was expecting people playing a kind of card game basically to be a bit more dry than they were. But they were a really excellent bunch of people. They were very, very funny, and the community responded so well to it, which was fantastic. And yeah, it goes back to what I was saying before about feeling a kind of sense of responsibility, not just to the players, but also, to people that were actually watching this stuff, because that is what we were making it for, was for people to watch and hopefully enjoy. Or that's why people like me get involved, is because I'm not a gamer, Richard. So to me, the only thing that I can take from it is the thought that actually someone's really into this stuff, and they watch and they're like, yeah, awesome, totally want to watch Artosis play Crip or whatever. So yeah, that was really important, and it's sad that it's gone downhill. But Hearthstone is a self-regulating community, and the next thing will be along very soon. And I'm glad that we had an opportunity to work alongside some of those guys, and hopefully it did some good for their personal careers, and hopefully people enjoyed it. But yeah, it is a real shame, and I'm sorry to that community.
So here we go then. Let's get into the business end of it. We've had some laughs, we've had some thrills, chills, and spills in a Mercedes along the way. But let's talk about the real stuff, and that is that there were a lot of people who, when presented with this opportunity, up sticks. They moved to Germany. They bought houses on not bought, but rented houses on 1-year leases that they're, committed to. And then the money dries up. So what's happening the first month you guys don't get paid? How are people reacting? How did management frame it with you? What was going on?
Okay, so the first month you don't get paid. What happens is, obviously, you get to 2 weeks in, let's say, and people are starting to seriously not so much get angry, but just want to know, well, hang on, what is the situation here? Why have we not been paid? We've only just started, relatively speaking. I don't think anyone really thought straight away this thing is going to go bankrupt, or at least not that quickly anyway. So it started off with asking some serious questions. Then our chief executive, Mr. Lee, came down from the Berlin office in Mitte, and he came down and he talked to us, and he said some absolute horse shit about how the weather outside was how he felt in his soul.
Really?
Yeah. It was a sunny day out. No, I'm just kidding. It was it was a grey and miserable day, and yeah, it was complete nonsense. And then he told us a series of half-truths, or maybe he was being miscommunicated to by Sapinder, but he basically told us the money is on its way. We're very sorry. We haven't been paid either. It's a problem with them changing offices from Hong Kong to Luxembourg. That relocation has caused tax problems, yada, yada, yada. You'll have your money very soon. Please keep on working. Please keep on coming into work. If you don't, then the whole thing really will be screwed. So we were like, all right, fair enough. This stuff happens, Eventually we got paid for, I think, January or February. It was a month later. So that was something. But then the next pay didn't happen. And at this point, people are starting to become increasingly worried. Mr. Lee comes in to talk more about the weather. And then one day we got an email the evening before saying, everyone please be in the studio by 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and please bring all company property with you, laptops, keys, phones, whatever you've got. So, of course, everyone's like, holy shit, what is this? Mm. And the next day, they then fired, I don't know, about 12 people. But what they did was they chose to fire only 12 people from the production team, not from the executive branch at all. They were completely intact. And they did it as a cost-saving exercise. Now, the problem with this is that the people that they fired were extremely capable, very talented people. It was nothing to do with merit. It was just to do with a kind of sense that they had to downsize. They'd obviously been told by Supinder, you're spending too much money, rein it in. So they just fired 12. They might as well have just picked the names out of hats as far as I could see, because they fired 12 very, very good people from our production team. So we then all trooped into the studio, and they told us about their new plan, which was, rather than creating premium content in the studio, what they actually wanted to do now was to do a lot of rebroadcasts and restreams of stuff, dubbing it into German in certain cases, or just rebroadcasting stuff from different markets. At that point, I just completely lost all interest, because that is not what I was there to do. You know, that is so basic that, you know, either of us could be literally doing that pretty much right now on a computer. You don't need a massive team. You don't need a massive studio to do all that. So that was kind of, that's the sort of trajectory, the downwards trajectory that it took.
What about, first thing I got to ask is, you'll be able to verify this story as being correct or not. Somebody told me that Morgenstern was directly asked to choose who to go, and he had to choose like maybe 4-5 people from the production team. And Morgan said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do your dirty work. I'm not going to pick who gets fired. That's bullshit. So they then fired the 10 or 12 that you were talking about. They just went, well, fuck it then. We'll fire everybody. Can you confirm if that's true or not?
Yeah, I believe that's true.
That is, again, just want to maybe mention that that's not, how employment law should, operates or anything. But equally, I think in trying to, that's incredibly spiteful. Like, in trying to do a good deed there, Morgan's inadvertently got like another 5 or 6 people fired by not wanting to pull the trigger himself. And I don't blame him for not doing that. No. Is Morgan a good guy, or was he part of the problem?
No, Morgan's a good guy, definitely. He was definitely on people's sides. He's a guy that has given up his life in Los Angeles, relocated completely over to the other side of the world. I don't know what happened behind closed doors when it came to meetings with Supinder and that kind of thing, but on the face of it, Morgan was a really, really nice guy. He taught me personally a lot. He taught me a lot about direction. We had to trust him. We didn't have another choice. And I do trust him anyway. But he was our sole spokesperson, when it came to negotiating this kind of stuff. And you can see through actions like that he does have people's good interests at heart. And then, of course, I don't think anyone was really expecting them to go and do what they did in that instance. Like, oh, you won't fire 4 people? Fine, we'll fire 12. It's insane.
So how bad did things get? Obviously, I know you've had some issues making rent and that kind of thing. I've been talking to another a former employee, who is facing eviction at the moment and might have to pay legal fees on top of back rent relating to that. Can you give us some insight into how awful and stressful it got when you guys, weren't getting paid, when the money stopped coming in?
Well, yeah, it's just really, really tough, because you don't anticipate this kind of thing to happen. And let's not forget, we were still paying to go to travel. Studio Babelsberg, just to paint a picture, is like, it's like going from New York City into New Jersey. It's not close particularly. So it's a long travel to get out there, spending money on food and stuff, and it's just dwindling away all of our savings. It got awful for a while. And then, for me personally, I suddenly had this, hey, nothing fucking matters at all. I'm going to start drinking at work. So I started having beers just to really be provocative, really, and to annoy the executives. And like not lots of it. Like I would have a beer at lunch and stuff, just to annoy people. And everyone got into this sort of slightly anarchic kind of fuck you sort of mentality about the whole thing. But behind all that, like joking, there's some pretty serious stuff. I know the person that you're talking about who's been having problems. That guy has never been paid.
Yeah.
Never. Like since he started working there, it's insane. I feel incredibly sorry for him because he's a very, very nice guy, and he's a very talented person as well. I mean, and he's not alone. There's lots of people that have been in that position, and they've cut their cloth accordingly. You know, they've thought, okay, well, I'm getting paid this, that, and that. I've got this contract, and none of it's been followed up on. I think when people have contracts, and when you're in this like big organization, there's a lot of people there, you feel like, okay, well, yeah, everything's going to be fine. And when it's not, it becomes very, very stressful. Like it really affected me personally, like a lot.
Mm. How, how soon were you able to kind of start turning things around? I mean, are you out of the woods now?
Well, yeah, but only because of doing freelance work and working on other projects. And at the beginning, because it was many months, I actually had to borrow some money off a friend to just like pay for basic stuff, you know. So I'm really not out of the woods at all, because I'm still waiting to get some money back from ESGN. The good news is that some people finally, their court date things have gone through and their insolvency guild procedures have gone through, and they've started to see some money at last. But that's a long time to wait. And the other hard thing is that if you work as, let's say, an artist or a filmmaker or something like this, it's very difficult to approach looking for new work or to approach your current projects if you have the immense, enormous stress of something like this hanging over you. I know that maybe sounds a little bit fey, or like you just need to kind of man up or something, but believe me, it's very hard to make something independently that has creative content involved if you have the pressure of this kind of thing hanging over you. And for me personally, I found that very, very difficult to work and to get my usual shit actually done, which is basically effectively returning to my normal life pre-ESGN. I found it extremely hard. It took me quite a few months. It's only been really in the last month or so that I've started to actually be able to really like kind of concentrate on stuff again and not worry so much about this whole ridiculous ESGN charade.
So I'm glad that the corner is kind of starting to get turned. Can you speak for sort of the group in the sense that ESGN are eventually paying the money, or is it that the German government is now involved and they are making sure people are compensated for the money that they're actually legally owed? Which one of the two is it?
It's very much the latter. ESGN have really put a lot of obstacles into the path the whole way.
Such as?
Basically not admitting to their insolvency when they could have done, such as restricting access to the HR department when we needed to get forms double stamped for the court, such as just generally just misleading people about the times and dates of payments. They've been incredibly unhelpful throughout the whole procedure. So now what happens is it's in an insolvency procedure, so they start selling off the assets and they start paying stuff, but they pay it in a certain hierarchy. So unfortunately, employees don't necessarily come at the top of that hierarchy. Maybe studio bills or utilities bills come above. So that has to get paid first. So the German government pay some of this money up front for us, and then the rest of it, we just have to cross our fingers and make sure that that there's still going to be some money left after they've sold all of these assets, so that we actually get some cash back. Now, some people have got their money already, and they were mostly the German people, because the Germans were able to deal with the paperwork. Now, the German guys are all lovely, but they just got there like a few days earlier. And they all helped us out as well. It's not a criticism, but I'm just saying, like, I'm still crossing my fingers to hope to God that there's actually something left over after they've literally finished scraping the very bottom of this crappy pot. Like, oh, here you go, Rory, here's €10, go and get yourself a bottle of beer. So let's hope, fingers crossed.
So we'll start winding it down, but we've talked about some of the funny stories. What's going to be your sort of endearing memory? Which is the best day that you worked at ESGN? Maybe the funniest day.
I guess working with my colleague Christy was pretty fun. She was quite a loudmouth, quite a light-fingered Welsh girl, and she actually did the ESGN voiceovers. So if you listen back to any of the VOD content on YouTube, you can hear Christy, and she was just a bit of a, she was just a bit of a gobshite, and she would just always cause a lot of problems and arguments, and there'd be like shouting and fighting, and it was incredibly entertaining. And I miss working with her a lot. She's a really great, like, no shit person. And then other than that, I suppose I should definitely mention, I just got a package a couple of days ago, and it came from Greece, and inside it is a framed photograph, and it comes from Kriparian, and it's a photo of me, Krip, Artosis, and Krip's girlfriend Rainier sitting on a sofa at about 2:00 in the morning, grinning like goons after the filming of Hearthstone, and they bothered to print it out on a really nice canvas and send it to me. And on the back, it says they've written, "You made ESGN filming a pleasure." And that was just really, really sweet, because those guys are really, they don't have to go out of their way to bother to kind of remember people like me or anything. But I just thought that was really a very touching thing to do. So thanks a lot to Crip and Rainier. That's very sweet gesture.
If that's the giddy high, what's the terrifying low? Which was the worst day? The day when you thought, you might crack up?
Definitely the day when they fired 12 people, a lot of whom were friends, and the rest of us are sitting around. They were calling people one by one into an office. Rather than emailing these people independently and saying, you come to head office at this time, it was like this horrible sort of Russian roulette style selection procedure where you don't know if your name's going to get called next. People are being called out the room. They're coming back either in tears or absolutely furious and punching walls and stuff. And us just being completely shocked and completely helpless to do anything about it. That's awful. And for that reason, those people really do not deserve the people that took that decision do not deserve any sympathy at all. It's horrible.
So, what's going to be next, do you think? Because ESGN, I mean, I don't know if you have any insight into what they're going to do, but these people aren't just going to disappear. I mean, they're going to try and have another roll of the dice, I think.
Well, what's next for me is that I'm going to become a professional hitman and kill all of these assholes. And then I'll just retire to a little cottage in the Pyrenees and just hang out there, probably with a dog, and that'll be me. Really,
that's good. I've never talked to anyone in my many years doing an interview where someone's just said my plan is to actually murder someone. So you've made history again.
You bring out the very best in me, Richard. What can I say?
I do try. But you must have an inkling about what these guys are going to do next.
Who are we talking about now? The executives?
The executives, the ESGN, the staff, okay. the handful of staff that didn't get fired.
I mean, I guess a lot of them have strong connections to the Korean StarCraft scene and the Korean scene in general. So I would imagine a lot of them will relocate back to Korea and continue to work with StarCraft in one capacity or another. I would find it extremely surprising. It's possible that someone like Azubu will mop up some of the kind of overspill, but Azubu, if you're listening, don't bother. Hire someone from the production team, but don't hire any of those fuckwits in the executive department, in my opinion. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't really care, Richard, as long as they just don't manage to fuck up another project as much as they did this one.
So, esports. We talked before the the recording of this and about, you know, what projects you were going to do next, apart from being a hitman. But I got to ask, when people pass through esports, I always want to know what they made of it and what kind of impression it's left on them. So,
well, I was very sort of skeptical about it at first because I'm afraid I'm one of those sort of people that worries about people spending too much time playing games. I know that I'm going to get probably crucified for saying that, but I did worry about that a lot. But then when I saw the kind of the lifestyle and the social interactions that these guys have, they are like sportsmen. They really are. Like, they're traveling the whole time and they're just completely dedicated to their job, and it's amazing. I mean, having the chance, admittedly very last minute, to go to something like DreamHack, for example, and seeing the scale of how this stuff is going on is incredible. For me personally, if I was going to do another project around esports, filming things from sort of behind the scenes, as it were, would definitely interest me a lot. You know, the famous King of Kong being a kind of example. Obviously, that's a different way, but there needs to be more documentary about this. And that was one of the things that got me excited about ESGN in the first place. I thought, okay, well, I can use maybe my documentary filmmaking skills here to actually like make some really cool behind the scenes stuff about how you've got, I don't know, 40, 50, 60,000 kids turning up to a conference center in the middle of Sweden, which suddenly has the fastest internet connection of anywhere in the world. I mean, that's an amazing place. So it's bizarre. Esports is a strange world, and I'm very happy to have witnessed part of it. I don't think I would want to get involved directly with another ESGN. Well, obviously not with an ESGN, but even with another more reputable organisation, I'd still be worried, because I don't really believe in the way that they're doing things. I don't think that's very right. I don't like the aesthetics of what's being produced, and I think that the market is not where I want it to be. So next project, I guess, would be to, if I was going to continue working, would be make a documentary film about what the hell goes on in esports.
Could you see yourself coming back realistically?
Not right now. I need a break after all this. Seriously, it's been really like quite a damaging experience. Hence the fact that we're even having this conversation, I suppose. And it's been exhausting, and I just don't want anything to do with. It's not the fault of esports. It's just that if by association, I just need to step away from it for at least for the next few projects, the next 6 months, the next year. Who knows?
Well, look, man, I'm really glad that you've sort of come forward, as it were, and we've been able to talk about a tiny fraction of the insanity that was going on behind the scenes at ESGN, and I'm sure we literally have only scratched the surface. It's probably is a subject I'll come back to, actually, because I think there's so many people that could say so many things. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be even more ridiculously that I'm not even aware of. It's definitely the sort of biggest failure in esports for quite a while. I mean, we generally get one a year, but this is pretty big, and I think it's good that we're able to sort of place it firmly in the history books. Thanks to guys like yourself being unafraid to talk about it.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on and for being extremely sort of sympathetic. And I know you've done a lot of hard work of actually looking into the kind of background of this story. And I think that kind of level of actual real journalism is something that really, really helps, because it will help people in the future not to have to either make these mistakes or be part of a company that is making these mistakes. So, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for that. I think the thing we need to work on is people not getting bewitched by dollar signs. Is that if we can get to a point where people can make rational, critical decisions in esports, because a lot of people have worked so many years for free or for next to nothing, or have even lost money on pursuing the esports dream. The first sniff of a paycheck they get, they just go crazy.
Yeah,
like starving dogs. It's horrible. But anyway, look, I'll let you go and work on your hitman job. I'm guessing we'll read about that in the papers. I'm looking forward to that. If you do actually do anything, if you can leave notes on the bodies saying that I didn't inspire you to do it or encourage you, that'd be nice, because I don't know if my career could take that sort of scandal.
I don't know, man. It might give this podcast a certain kind of spice if you're doing it from prison. True.
I'm not too sure if the squeals of agony from me having an unpleasant time with my cellmate would make for particularly good listening. But yeah, just something to think about. Karma. Since as you wanted someone to show you due consideration, it'd be nice if you could show that due consideration to me.
I think that is a lovely and very strange homoerotic image with which to conclude.
Yes, and that's the standard we've set on this broadcast. So anyway, thanks for coming on, Rory. That was Rory Dickenson, everyone. And there you go. That's kind of lifted the veil a little bit on ESGN. I'm sure if we had more time, we could go into a hell of a lot more. And just to remind you that this podcast was brought to you courtesy of Mad Cats, the fee from which will be going straight into Rory's pocket to help him with all of the payments that he's accrued during his time working for free. The product I'd like to draw your attention to is the Rat Tournament Edition gaming mouse, which you should check out. It's fully customizable and built with all these kind of plates in it, so it's ergonomic. You can put your hand around it, mold it perfectly to the shape of your hand. You can change the weight of it, so it's ideal for prolonged gaming sessions. Stop with all the stress on the wrist and the palms. But equally as well, it's got some great features. It goes up to 8,200 DPI. So it's, one of the most sensitive gaming mice out there. And it's great for anything that requires a high degree of precision. And it's just a good product. I wouldn't put anything on the podcast that I didn't believe in. And Mad Cats certainly make some great products on the market. So you can go and look that up. And I strongly recommend you do. And hopefully, while you're doing that, you'll also be cognizant of the fact that we'll be back next week with another deluge of esports information. So thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to my guest, Rory. We'll see you next week.
The Richard Lewis Esports Podcast. Taking you behind the scenes of the esports industry.